Coming up on Network Africa. Strange disease kills 5 in northwest Tanzania. Chaos reigns in Senegal as police clash with opposition supporters. Plus, the death toll from Cyclone Freddy surpasses 300. In southern Africa, hundreds are still missing in Malawi. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Joke Rogers here in Lagos. We begin in northwest Tanzania, where at least 5 people have died from an unidentified illness. 7 cases have so far been reported in Kagera region, and the authorities have dispatched a team of doctors to diagnose the disease. Health authorities in the East African country have described the illness, which exhibits symptoms of fever, headaches, fatigue, and nosebleeds, as strange. Its symptoms include, according to the government's chief medical officer, Tumaini Nago, residents in the area have been advised to avoid contact with infected people. In July last year, more than 20 cases with similar symptoms were reported in the southern Lindi region. 3 people died from the outbreak. Investigations later identified the disease as leptospirosis, also known as Wales disease. We'll get more on that later. In the meantime, police and demonstrators have clashed again in Senegal's capital, Dakar, ahead of a court case involving opposition leader and presidential aspirant Ousmane Sonko, who has gained widespread support among much of the country's youth. Police fired tear gas at hundreds of Sonko supporters as they trailed vehicles taking him to court for the resumption of a libel case against him. Protesters burned tires in the streets and hurled stones at police. An outlet of a French supermarket chain and several buses were set ablaze. Mr. Sonko, who came third in the 2019 presidential election, is also charged with raping a beauty salon employee in 2021 and making death threats against her. He denies all wrongdoing and says the accusations are politically motivated. Thursday's skirmishes are the latest round of unrest in Senegal, where presidential elections are scheduled for February next year. The country has long been seen as a bastion of stability and democracy in a restive region, a reputation shaken by deadly violence over the last 2 years. Much of the anger is targeted towards President Macky Sall, whose failure to rule out running for a 3rd term in office has angered many. And the son of Uganda's aging leader, Yoweri Museveni, has said that he intends to stand for presidency in 2026. The first time the outspoken army general has given a timeline for replacing his father, who has ruled the East African country for 37 years. Uganda's opposition has long accused Mr. Museveni of seeking to impose a monarchy on the state and claimed he was grooming Kainerugaba to take over from him. Mr. Museveni has denied such accusations. Currently a presidential advisor, the 48-year-old general is known for firing off controversial tweets that have earned him reprimands from his father. In another tweet on Wednesday, he expressed his impatience at waiting so long to replace his father. He said, quote, "The Prime Minister of UK is 42 years old. The Prime Minister of Finland is 37 years. Some of us are hitting 50 years old. We're tired of waiting forever." South African police have said that the planned opposition protest by opposition party Economic Freedom Fighters on Monday are not a mere shutdown, but an attempt to overthrow the government. The Economic Freedom Fighters is organizing nationwide marches to protest against the country's power crisis and has called on President Cyril Ramaphosa to resign. According to the EEF, according to the police, this is an attempt to overthrow the government. This is not a shutdown, but it's anarchy. He also said that on Friday, he talked about this on Friday while briefing media on security plans to deal with threats posed by the protesters. We go now to Malawi, where the president, Lazarus Chakwera, has visited victims of Cyclone Freddy in a hospital as the country reported 225 deaths, with hundreds injured and some people still missing. The numbers have now risen. President Chakwera declared 14 days of national mourning and called for international support for relief efforts. He said more than 80,000 people were displaced. The tropical storm killed about 27 people in Madagascar and Mozambique before lashing Mozambique a second time. The total death toll has surpassed 300, according to the authorities. The storm tore through southern Africa over the weekend for a second time after first making landfall in late February. It's one of the longest-lasting tropical cyclones ever recorded and one of the deadliest in Africa in recent years. Still in Malawi, in Mtuchira village in the Chirazulu district, some survivors of tropical cyclone Freddy are sheltered in a school after a landslide and flooding swept away their homes. Apart from needing psychological care for the traumatic incident, families are also in need for sustenance.
Survivors say they can still hear the screams of people caught in the flooding and landslide.
It will be hard to go back to that place in peace, because what we heard and saw then will always be in our minds. You feel like you can still hear people screaming. It's really frightening because we are living under the mountains, and it will always remind us of the water coming from there.
Another survivor calls for food, clothing and bedding to be sent to the victims.
We need food, clothes and bedding. It is hard to survive without food. And if possible, we would like to find a place where we can build new homes.
The storm has now dissipated, but according to the Ministry of Natural Resources and Climate Change, heavy rains are expected to continue in parts of Malawi and will likely cause more floods around lakeshore areas. Tropical Cyclone Freddy has killed more than 400 people in Malawi, Mozambique and Madagascar since it first made landfall in Africa in late February and circled back to hit the region for a second time over the weekend. Freddy is one of the longest-lasting tropical cyclones ever recorded and one of the deadliest in Africa.
Meanwhile, the Zambian government has provided 2 aircraft to help in rescue and distribution of relief aid to victims of Tropical Storm Freddy in Malawi. Malawi Defense Force has confirmed the arrival of the planes. The aircraft will be deployed to hard-to-reach southern areas in Mulanje, Falombi and Sanje, where many people are feared trapped, according to Deputy Chief of Military Operations Colonel Lamek Kalenga. Sniffer dogs have also been dispatched to help find victims swept by the mudslides. The death toll from the devastating storm has jumped to 326, with more than 200 others declared missing by authorities. A human rights group has urged authorities in Mozambique to investigate the alleged use of tear gas by police force during the funeral of a popular rapper known for his critical stance against the government. Edson de Luz, known as Azagay, died last week due to a sudden illness, and his death prompted vigils across Angola and Mozambique. In a new report, Human Rights Watch said the police dispersed his supporters using tear gas during his funeral. It urged the government to probe the incident. The funeral was held with thousands of people joining the convoy carrying the coffin to the cemetery. Songs of the late singer could be heard in the main streets of Maputo, the country's capital, as a tribute to Azagaya. More than 2 tons of natural uranium reported missing by the United Nations nuclear watchdog in Libya have been found. Leader of the renegade commander Khalifa Haftar's communications division, General Khalid al-Majub, says that the containers of uranium had been recovered barely 5 kilometers from where they had been stored in southern Libya. Al-Majub referred in a statement to 10 missing barrels being found near the border with Chad, although a separate video issued by his media unit showed workers counting 18 recovered barrels. Earlier, the nuclear watchdog had said that about 2.3 tons of natural uranium had gone missing from a site in Libya that was not under government control. The IAEA warned that the missing uranium presented a radiological risk as well as nuclear security concerns. Still to come on the program. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken meets reformed jihadists in Niger Republic. Details in a moment. Please stay with us. Welcome back to the program. Back to our top story in Tanzania, where at least 5 people have died from an unidentified illness. 7 cases have so far been reported in the Kagera region, and the authorities have since dispatched a team of doctors to diagnose what exactly the disease is. The health authorities in the East African country have described the illness, which exhibits symptoms of fever, headaches, fatigue, and nosebleeds, as strange. Its symptoms include headaches, as I've mentioned earlier, nosebleeds, and fever. Residents in the area have been advised to avoid contact with infected people. Let's get more on that. I'm being joined on the program by the VOA correspondent, Charles Kombe. Charles joins us online from Shimazi in Tanzania. Hello, Charles.
Hello. How are you?
Certainly. So can you give us an update on this situation about this strange illness?
Well, we are still waiting for the updates regarding the mysterious illness, since there has been only one statement from the authorities that released late Thursday. And the statement was given out by the chief medical officer, Tumaini Nagu, yesterday night. And she said that 5 people have died so far, and out of 7 people who have been detected with the symptoms such as fever, vomiting, and bleeding, and also kidney failure. 2 out of 7 are still admitted at the nearby hospitals and are undergoing treatment. She also said that the team of medical experts are on the ground to detect the kind of disease that has erupted in that area.
So if the disease is still being investigated and diagnosis is, being sought, what kind of treatment are the patients undergoing?
Well, according to the statement of from the chief medical officers, that patients who are still undergoing treatment, she didn't reveal exactly what kind of treatment that they are receiving, since because the disease exactly isn't known. So it is yet to know exactly what kind of treatment that the patients are undergoing as of now.
Right. So the authorities have said that people should, distance themselves from those who, are infected with this disease. But do they know how it's spread? We know that with COVID, there's coughing, there's sneezing. How is this particular disease spread?
Well, the authorities have not yet revealed how this disease is spread, but due to the symptoms that the chief medical officer has revealed yesterday, and the precaution that she has advised citizens to adhere, is that people should keep distance and make sure that they not keep contact with those people who have undergoing or developed such kind of symptoms. But it is yet to be known that how this disease is spread.
So according to the authorities, the disease is similar to leptospirosis, which struck the community in July last year. How was that disease and how was it handled? How serious was it at that time?
Well, the disease, which was labeled as the rat disease by that time in July, it was only 3 people who have died, and 13 people were diagnosed with the disease. So it was just like this, since because previously it erupted as people were dying and developing some of these symptoms. But it was yet to be known this disease has erupted. But later on, the disease was growing, and it was developed it was erupted in the area known as Lindi, the region known as Lindi, the northwest parts of Tanzania.
Right. Let's get back to the mysterious disease. I mean, the people that were affected, those that got infected with this disease, how are they? Are they related? Are they members of the same family, members of the same community? Were they all living, in one place at that time, or are they really from different areas?
Well, previously, yesterday, there has been a lot of news that were circulating on social media. And these news were posted in different social media accounts. And it stated that these people who died were from the same family. But according to Albert Shalamila, who is the regional commissioner of Kagera region, he said yesterday in a statement that it was rumors, but he hasn't said where exactly. The families of these who are deceased. So it is yet to know that these people are from the same family or are from different neighborhood. So maybe we are still waiting to know exactly the updates from this, and we are waiting to see how authorities are going to react on this.
Right. Thank you, Charles, for the update on that from Tanzania.
Thank you so much for having me.
Let's continue on the program. 12 out of 15 soldiers have been found guilty for raping minors in the Democratic Republic of Congo. This followed several weeks of hearings in the courts. In a court in Kamanyola, one soldier was discharged dishonorably for raping a 14-year-old girl. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken has begun a visit to Niger Republic by meeting former jihadists who have been rehabilitated through a vocational training program backed by U.S. funding. Mr. Blinken called it a model for the region, which has been beset by attacks by Islamist militants. It's the first ever visit to Niger by a U.S. Secretary of State. And U.S. officials said his arrival was a show of support for President Mohamed Bazoum, who has allowed Western militaries to operate from his country. Neighbors Mali and Burkina Faso have kicked out French troops and replaced them with Russian mercenaries from the Wagner Group. The U.S. has described Wagner as a destabilizing force and designated it an international criminal organization. Meanwhile, Mr. Blinken has announced $150 million in new humanitarian assistance for Africa's Sahel region, saying it will provide life-saving support to refugees and others impacted by conflict and food insecurity. Making the announcement during his visit to Niger, Mr. Blinken said the aid would address needs in Niger, Burkina Faso, Chad, Mali, and Mauritania. The package also included funding to support Sahelian refugees in Libya and Niger.
I announced nearly $150 million in new humanitarian assistance to help meet needs in West and Central Africa and the Sahel created by regional instability. That assistance will support the provision of shelter, essential health care, emergency food, safe drinking water, sanitation, hygiene services, and will also support vulnerable refugees and asylum seekers evacuated to Niger. And I have to say, the generosity of Niger, of its people, to so many refugees, so many displaced persons, is remarkable. We're committed to continuing to invest in the resilience of democracies to a wide range of threats and challenges, from corruption to disinformation. And we continue to support a free and independent press, as we have done in Niger for decades.
Elsewhere in 2021, Islamist insurgents wreaked havoc in the state by blowing up power transmission lines in Maiduguri. That's talking about Borno State in northeast Nigeria. Efforts to repair the transmission lines were disrupted by further attacks on the repair vehicles as militants swiftly re-sabotaged the work. Businesses in the state suffered as a result until an emergency gas-fired power plant was opened up. Here's the story.
Lydia
Peter Shilangwa sets up her tripod and ring light as she prepares to record a new session of her vlog on relationship tips. Today, she's talking about values in a relationship, which she will then post to her Facebook page of over 5,000 followers. In the last 2 years, Peter Shilangwa has battled with getting a clean audio of her recordings as she's had to rely on diesel generator after Islamist insurgents blew up power transmission lines in her northeastern city of Maiduguri.
Sometimes when I finish shooting my video, then when I play it, I will like feel the sound of the generator, which is the background. It spoils my background and it's very bad. I don't really like it. But you see, when lights came, actually there's nothing like sound, no disturbance, nothing. Everything is just moving smoothly.
Peter Shilangwa's joy comes after Nigeria's outgoing president, Muhammadu Buhari, opened an emergency gas-fired power plant in the northeastern city of Maiduguri in March. The gas-fired plant enables the city to be less dependent on power being transmitted from outside and therefore less vulnerable to sabotage. The 50-megawatt plant is meant to bring temporary relief to the Borno State capital. According to the government, the Maiduguri Emergency Power Project is part of an incremental 4,000 megawatts of power generating assets that has been embarked upon to improve national power supply and stimulate economic growth across the country. At Abubakar Unisas Barbing Salon, clients can now have a haircut for a lower price. The clients were paying much more in the past, and he had also had to battle petrol scarcity. Maiduguri has been without power since the attack in January 2021, but today the streets are vibrantly lit at night again.
That's the program today. Thank you for watching. I'm Joker Rogers.